Well, the 1995 Ford Crown Victoria is back, the one that I rebuilt probably about a year ago now. The owners that I gave it to ultimately ended up not being able to afford insurance for two vehicles, so now it's back in my possession. And since then I've added new spark plug wires and all new spark plugs. And today I'm going to focus on the air conditioning system. There's actually definitely a leak here, and it's low on charge. And I believe that the leak is pretty obvious. It's going to be right under the high pressure service valve. See if I can open it and hear a little hiss come out. And that's pretty much where the source of the leak is. It's pretty obvious, even without a leak detector. So hopefully I can kind of exercise that valve a little bit after charging it and eliminate the leak. Usually on these Fords they'll leak around these quick disconnect fittings, and when they do there'll be a lot of moisture around here because the oil leaks out at the same time. Just like the Buick Roadmaster that I did last weekend, this Ford also has a low pressure safety. And it screws in just like on the Buick does, and this switch seems to be okay. It's nice and dry. And here are the two fittings on the condenser, and they look nice and dry. Little garter spring type fittings. And then you've got a couple of fittings way down there where the compressor is. Really hard to see with the camera, but they look dry as well, so I'm pretty sure this is going to be the culprit. So we'll go ahead and put a set of gauges on here, and we'll see how this thing is behaving now that it's low on refrigerant. Okay, everything is all set up. I've got the refrigerant ready to go and sitting on the refrigeration scale. You'll notice that I do not have the special charging attachment, the automatic attachment that I have, because unlike before, I'm not going to be able to weigh in the charge because the system has some charge in here. And the absolute best way to do this would be to pull the charge out and go ahead and weigh the charge back in. On this Crown Vic, it's going to be about 2 pounds 6 ounces, a little bit more than the Buick Roadmaster. But that's pretty wasteful and time consuming. So in this scenario, I'm going to just simply see what I can do by adding some gas. And the reason I have it on a scale is that I know what value not to exceed. I don't know how much gas is in the system now, but I know if I start approaching that number, I'll be in an overcharge situation, which is the worst thing you can possibly do. These systems can take a little bit of overcharge because of the generously sized accumulator, but you want to try to avoid that if you can. And the reason I'm doing this is a couple of reasons. A is it needs to be done. I've got a leaking valve here that I'm hoping just with the exercise of the tool here I can go ahead and address the leak. And the other thing is I want to do is play with this a little bit. With a residential system, it's really kind of hard to play with those. They run at a constant speed. But with an automotive system, it's a little bit easier. You can vary the speed of the engine and hence the compressor. In this case, the Ford 4.6, anywhere between about 650 RPM to 5500 RPM. That's quite a range. And you can see what that does to your pressures and your superheat and your subcool. Now in a residential system, you would charge by superheat or subcool if you didn't know how much Freon was already in there, instead of charging by weight. But in this case, because of the engine speed can vary considerably and the airflow across the condenser can vary considerably, you really can't do that. But it still will be interesting to see what the superheat and subcool end up being. What they are now before the system's running, and what they are when the final charge is put in the system. I've got all the valves opened up, and I've been able to purge all the gas from the lines. And because this is a 4-port manifold, you can open up any one of these valves and let some gas out of an unused port, and that way you purge the entire manifold. So all the air is out of the system, so we keep everything nice and dry. And I'm on the East Coast, and we're still having just tons and tons of rain, as you can see. But nothing too bad. But it's a little bit chilly out here to be running an air conditioner. And my outdoor dry bulb at this point is about 61 degrees. Pretty chilly to be running an air conditioner. I'm going to go ahead and try as best I can, but the load on the evaporator is just basically going to be non-existent, so I'm not really sure how successful I'll be. I'll probably have to come back and tweak the charge on this a little bit more accurately in the summertime when everything's nice and loaded down. What we can do, however, as we start adding gas to the system to avoid overcharging, is we can keep an eye on our pressures, and we can keep an eye on our saturation temperature out of the evaporator. We don't want that value getting below freezing for too long, or you're going to have a frozen evaporator coil. And we can also use this PT chart that was conveniently printed on the back of one of my gauge sets, the analog gauge set. We can use this PT chart, pressure temperature chart, to get a fairly good idea of what the temperatures and pressures should be. The lowest I can go is about 65 degrees, which further emphasizes, probably shouldn't be running an air conditioner when it's that cold out here, but I'm trying to do all this before the really hot weather gets here, so I don't have to worry about it. So we can look at these pressures and see if we can get the pressures as close in this range as we possibly can on the low side and on the high side. So we'll go ahead and start the engine, and we'll engage the air conditioning system and see what everything looks like. As you can see, the compressor will not stay engaged very long. And what's happening is the low pressure switch is cutting out our safety. Right around 19 pounds it looks like, so I really can't get very accurate readings when the system is not staying engaged. Numbers are all over the place. So we'll have to add some charge to it. I've got the windows down in the car so it can't get cold. And I've got the system running as high as I can. We want to get that number down in the green area, about 40 degrees evaporating temperature. So we're basically trying to evaporate it around, who knows, 37 degrees, 40 degrees, something like that. Now last time I had in the Buick, I had the engine turned off and I was doing a complete evacuation and recharge, and I had this thing turned upside down and I was charging as a liquid into the high side, which you can do as long as the compressor is not engaged. But in this case, since the system already has some gas in here, we're going to have to charge this as a gas, and we're going to go into the low side of the system. So we make sure that our high side is completely shut down, because these pressures are going to start building up. We'll open up our low side. And nothing's happening right now because the process valve here is closed. Turn on our scale, and then we can keep track of how much Freon we're actually adding in. And we'll start the charging process. could do if I were in a hurry is I could jump out that low pressure safety to force the compressor on. But I think I'll just let it draw and charge naturally. But part of the reason it's cycling also is because there's not a lot of load on the evaporator. So it's going to be a delicate balance between trying to figure out when the cycling is actually normal and when the cycling is due to the low charge state. Compressor's staying on a little bit longer now. I'm going to go ahead and stop at about 12 ounces, let it stabilize and see what happens. The evaporating temperature is getting down close to where it needs to be. Pressures are still kind of fluctuating. Try adding in a little bit more. I think we made the low pressure switch happier. You can see the compressor staying engaged a lot longer now. Only when the compressor is engaged are we going to have accurate readings. So we got about 18 PSI and 118 on the high side. Still need to come up just a little more. Under a pound. Let's see what that does to us. We're evaporating at about 29 degrees, 29 and a half degrees, condensing at 105 degrees. So we got a good temperature split across the condenser for sure. 20 pounds on the low side, 132 on the high side. Compressor is staying engaged almost continuously now, which it should do because the passenger compartment should never get colder because the windows are down. So 20 and 133. We are very close, very, very close. Now this is for 65 degrees, and we're at 62 degrees. I don't know what the pressure should be below that, but these should go down If this had a row for 60, these would be maybe like 20 to 30, and maybe 130 to 150 or 145 or somewhere around in there. Now that the compressor is staying engaged, we've got a much better ability to make sense of these pressure readings, where it looks like we're staying pretty much consistently right at around 20 and 132. Now on a cold day like we have today, that's probably very close to what it should be. Had to add about 15 ounces. That's more than I thought I'd have to add. Suction line's nice and cold. Basically about 63 degrees. And we're evaporating at about 30 degrees. Let's check inside the car now. Oh yes, temperature is coming down right where it should be. I'll have to check this again in the summertime, but I think what I'll do is just call it good for now. I certainly don't want to overcharge it. That air is very cold. My side's gone up just a tad. Largely due to the fact that the car is not in motion. There's not really a whole lot of air coming through here. Ford did install a pusher fan, which is what this connection is right here, that comes on in addition to the mechanical fan, but it's so cold out here, you can actually see what these mechanical fans do. And the mechanical fan's not even turning. I have to put my fingers in it, which I wouldn't recommend with a running engine. But that's exactly what those fans are supposed to do. So it's so chilly out here, the mechanical fan doesn't even have to come on to cool the engine. Just a supplemental electric cooling fan. And the compressor is finally shut down. It's actually what it's supposed to do to prevent the evaporator from freezing, because as the temperature goes down, so does the pressure, and that switch will open right up. But we're staying engaged a lot longer now. But I think I'm going to call that good. We're still within range on the high side at about 140 pounds. And probably okay on the low side given the outside temperature. See what happens if we increase the compressor speed now. As you would expect, we increased our pressures. but the compressor actually had to work less. The compressor was actually cycling more because it was more efficient at the higher speeds. At the lower speeds, it's having to stay on longer. Check our temperatures one more time. And that's why automotive air conditioning is so interesting, because you can really get to see how the compressors change. And that low temperature or low pressure cutoff switch is doing its job by not letting the evaporator freeze. So I think I'm happy with that. You would think the evaporator would be freezing because it's below 32 degrees on saturation, but there's so much airflow going through there, hopefully it will not. So I'm going to call that good and then check it again in the summertime. Hopefully this helps you guys out charging your systems up. I wanted to do a slightly different charging video where you just need to add some refrigerant to the system and don't necessarily need to do a complete evacuation and recharge, recover all the refrigerant and everything like that. We're just topping it off for now. But I think I'm going to be good to go for the summertime coming up soon here.